Now let's talk about HTML elements and their identifiers. We're doing this because what we're going to do next is to modify the contents of our templates using style sheets, and in order to do that, we need to understand how elements are identified. Now, there's actually 3 ways to really tag or select an element on a template. And I don't mean visually selecting it, I mean referring to it from either a style sheet or a script. The first one is by its element name. So, for example, this is a paragraph, and any reference to the P tag, which is the paragraph, will affect any paragraph on your page. Anything that is a paragraph. That can be directly in the body, that can be inside a table, that can be anything, anywhere on the page. As long as it's within a paragraph, it's going to be affected by style sheets and JavaScripts. Another example is any element inside the table. The table, the body, the TR, the TD, any of those elements can be selected by a style sheet selector or a JavaScript. Now, the second way that you can refer to an element is via a class. Now, a class is a name that you give to an element, but that can be shared between multiple elements. So let's say you want to have something that is highlighted, but you don't want to specify whether it's a paragraph or a table. You just want any element that you give the name highlighted to have a yellow background, like a highlighter. What you do is you add the name of the class to any element that you want to affect using that class. And the last way that we can refer to an element is via an ID. The ID has to be unique, meaning you can't share an ID between multiple elements. There's nothing that will actually stop you from giving the same ID to multiple elements, but know that only the first one will be affected. Now, when I say unique, I mean unique per section, meaning if you have 2 sections inside of a print, then you can have the same ID on 2 sections, they will both be affected. Now, referring to elements by their name, a class, or ID is a good way to affect them depending on whether you want to affect one or more elements. However, it does do something about performance, especially when talking about scripts. Essentially, the idea is that if you have a script that has a text selector, what it does is that it does a search and replace for the text to replace it with the variable data everywhere in your template. Now, the bigger the job you have, the bigger the number of templates and the number of pages, the more those microseconds more will add up. Affecting a class is a bit more efficient, meaning it selects on the page anything that has that class and will ignore everything else. Let me show you something in the script selectors just to give you an idea of how you can use those in scripts. So inside of the script editor or the script wizard, you have 3 options. You have the selector, text, or selector and text options. The selector option refers to a CSS selector, meaning if you have a class, then you can refer to it with a dot. And what we're doing here, of course, it screws up the document a little bit, but both of the elements that I had the highlighted class on are now affected by this script. The other thing you can do is refer to an ID. Now, because the ID is unique, this is a bit more efficient in terms of search and replace than the placeholder was. Now, the placeholder now is ignored. It's only getting that table with the ID address block to do that replace. If you put @address@ anywhere else on the page, it will be ignored. Now, the last one is the selector and text, which means that the script will first look at the selector, and then find the text within that selector. So if you have a couple of paragraphs with a specific class, and inside of them you have a placeholder, then this will only look for the placeholder within the paragraphs that have the specific class. So here my selector will still work because I'm looking at the address block ID, then I'm looking for the address text. So again, it affects only the text within the element that has the specific ID. So no change in visuals, but it does affect a little bit the way that it works in the background. Now, I mentioned also that IDs and classes are affected by style sheets. We have a separate animation on that, but let me very quickly show you, while I have all this set up, what it looks like to change something for a specific style. So I have a class that's called highlighted, and I want to give it a yellowish background. When you add a new style sheet rule, the name here is exactly the same as a selector inside of a text script. Not the text, but really the selector. So here we have .class, which refers to a class. We could use the ID for the address block, etc. Let me add the .highlighted and add a background color. And of course, the style sheets can refer to an element name. So here, all of the P elements or paragraph are affected by being put in bold. So a small recap of what we just saw. You can affect and select different elements on your page in 3 different ways. Using the element name, such as a P or TD tag inside of your paragraph or table. Using a class, which can affect a number of elements of any type. Or using an ID, which affects only a single element on your page. These references can be made either from a script or from a CSS style sheets, which we will see in the next animation.